everybody, and welcome. If you're new here, well, hi. This is a presentation we're doing for university, so originally only the professor is supposed to see this, but like now you are seeing it too, so hi. We're talking about the sterilization of Native Americans. We're not talking about something that's funny, but we're gonna try to make it slightly lighter, not as heavy as it is. So if you see me laughing, I'm not laughing at the subject, I'm just laughing because sometimes it gets uncomfortable and it's a heavy topic. So don't take anything personally. For now, let's get started, I guess. Hello, Professor. You're one in the middle of everyone else. Don't be shy. Maybe comment down below, okay? So, my partner is gonna start here. Her name is Aesha, by the way.
Hi, everyone.
And so, let's get started.
Okay, so today we are, as Abrar mentioned, we're going to speak about the sterilization of Native Americans. And honestly, this was one of the hardest topics that I have ever did any sort of research about. It was heavy, as she said. It was really painful to read all the stories and all the facts that happened to the original people of the continent. And we love to shed the light of some of the sufferings that they have went through during the course of the history. So, as a start, people frequently associate the word genocide with mass killings, like the ones that happen in some parts of Africa when there is a use of machetes or knives or swords, or it could be as it happened with the Holocaust, like in gas chambers. But overall, genocide is the intention to completely or partially annihilate a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. That is the crime of genocide. Although killing is a part of the definition of genocide, it also covers less obvious actions, such as the forced sterilization, which we will be talking about. And that is the aim of all of these procedures is the preventing of births within the group. The peak of all of those procedures happened in the 1970s, where thousands of low-income women and women of color, even women of the black race, were sterilized frequently without their consent or full understanding of the surgical procedure, the risk of these kind of procedures to their physical and to their mental health.
Native American women were the most affected by the forced sterilizations that the government enforced on people. Although blacks and other communities suffered, natives suffered more, if you will. And it made it easier for the government to target them because of the various cultural and societal characteristics that made them particularly vulnerable to these kind of things.
They were deprived of their children and their future as independent nations due to the tribal dependence on the federal government through the Department of Health, Education, the Indian Health Service, which was also called the IHS, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Native women fight for reproductive rights have given them a sense of empowerment that is in line with the broader Native American struggle to be liberated from institutional control. Within tribes, the effect of the forced sterilization procedures carried out by the Indian Health Service are still evident today. Sterilization had a quantifiable impact on birth rate, but many Native American women also experienced non-quantifiable effects. Sterilization has negative psychological and societal repercussions in Native American society since women's fertility is highly valued. Because of the way Native American people consider motherhood, a woman who is unable to have children will likely face shame, embarrassment, and even condemnation from her tribe.
So we talked about a lot, but let's define what exactly is sterilization. So the exact definition is a surgical procedure that prevents a person or an animal from having offsprings or infants or babies. So that is done in several different ways and it is pretty long term. So it is likely irreversible. The likelihood of a woman getting pregnant after that procedure is very slim to none. So the effects are pretty much forever. The two most often utilized sterilization procedures were hysterectomy and tubal ligations. The Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists of Canada estimated that 2 to 10 out of every 1,000 women who had their tubes tied may become pregnant. So that is not even 1%. The procedure itself is very simple in theory, but like I'm not saying it's simple as an everyday thing. You don't get it for fun. But if you were to see a video of it, it's very simple to understand. So you know how the female reproductive system is consisting of few different elements, right? One of them is the fallopian tubes. So they do cut these fallopian tubes, both of them, to prevent the egg from reaching the uterus, and therefore the semen would not have a chance to fertilize an egg that does not exist, right? So yeah, that is simply it. The procedure can be completed in 4 different ways. Sealing the end of the fallopian tubes after cutting them in half or removing parts of them. Number 2 is the tubes can be blocked using electrical current. 3 is using a clip or a ring to clamp the tubes shut from the outside. The 4th one is the removal of the entire tube system, which honestly sounds so brutal.
So during the late 60s and the early 70s, the government of the United States tried to do some sort of control over the numbers of the minorities, and a policy of involuntary surgical sterilization was imposed upon Native American women. The procedure thought to have been performed on 1 out of every 4 Native American women at that time, against her knowledge, of course, or consent, assisted by government assumptions that high Native American birth rates should be stemmed and bolstered by law enforcement. In accordance with the Economic Opportunity Act of 1964, HEW and other federal organizations were tasked with providing family planning services to unprivileged and needy people. In 1965, IHS started offering family planning services to Native Americans in compliance with this policy. While a guideline emphasized that family planning should include details about various birth controls methods and their side effects, the actual services provided quickly moved beyond contraception and toward eugenics.
This policy of forced sterilization ended with the death of many indigenous women. Many of them who have already have children, but they were basically obliged by their doctors and the hospitals they went to get their tubes tied because they allegedly already had children. So they either told them, you have to come in to get your tubes tied because you already have 20 or so children, so you don't need more. That's a quote, I'm not saying that, but the other way is they called them in for appendicitis or any other routine surgery. That is also in quotes. I don't know what are routine surgeries, but so a routine surgery. And one example is appendicitis. So they'd call them in for an appendicitis, but then they would get their tubes tied without their knowledge.
So Native Americans and the people of color were seen by the American government as morally, intellectually, and socially deficient. And because Native Americans and people of color lacked access to good quality health care, a large percentage of children would die before the age of 5. Thus, to make up for this, the indigenous used to bring more children, trying to make up for the loss of the younger children. Despite the effect it had on their health, they still had more children. Some of the Indian Health Service, HIS Doctor, which is an agency within the US Department of Health and Human Services, thought that were already too many minority people producing difficulties in the country and in the community, and that American Indian and other minority women lack the intelligence to use other methods of birth control successfully.
All right, so in 1907, Sir Charles Darwin, and no, I am not giving him a start name. His name is actually Sir Charles Darwin. How did I not know this? But anyways, not him. We're not concerned with him just yet. It's his cousin, Sir Francis Galton. Now, this Sir is sassy one. It's not actually his name. But he launched the eugenics movement, which basically encapsulated his thoughts about who should and should not be able to procreate in the world, basically. So his thoughts created this movement that was the foundation for a society, believe it or not. They created the Education Society based off of Francis Galton's thoughts on who should and should not procreate. Now, apparently, he coined the term eugenics in 1883 to refer to the application of genetics to better the human race. Now, this whole thing is a quote. I did not say that. His belief shifted towards the use of eugenics to control the birth rate to the unfit, and Galton's publication helped create a new discipline to the science of race improvement. So basically, he wanted, by launching the Education Society and having the eugenics movement, to better the human race. By that he means removing the unfit or the unwhole human beings, which in his case, or in that case, is the black people, or the Native Americans, or just indigenous people in general, just because of the fact that they were different than him. Because if you think about it, how are human beings any less than other human beings? For us, it doesn't make sense, but apparently it made enough sense to him that he created a whole thing out of it.
So basically anyone who's not white.
Anyone who's not white.
Basically
Exactly.
anyone who's not white.
I mean, even white people, if you think about it, they cascaded the Irish. The Irish are white, right?
Of course. But not to them,
Not to them.
apparently.
Not to them. We're talking about one more not so great person. His name is Gregor Mendel. Now, apparently he discovered this theory that we are somehow related, not related, but whatever plants go through, we could go through the same as well. So like in plants, he discovered that the earlier generations passed down their genes and stuff to the younger generations of plants. So he took that theory and applied it to humans. But he applied it in a more sinister way, if you will. He thought that social evils such as poverty are passed down. So basically, in his theory, anyone who is poor or suffering with anything that is not socially normal at that time should and would be killed, to not be able to have kids, or just
Annihilated.
annihilated.
Because I like that word.
The peak period of sterilization in women happened in the 1970s, believe it or not. I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound like very far to me, right? It is estimated that between 25 to 30% of women between the ages of 15 to 44 were sterilized, which honestly just breaks my heart. How did nobody speak against anything? Like, was everyone on board? Did no one leak anything? Like, nowadays we expect people to be whistleblowers in some sort of capacity. People do say stuff, especially if you take the UFO thingy. People say stuff all the time. We have however many guys coming forward saying stuff and telling about the government, telling about stuff that normal people don't know about. How was this able to go on for this long without anybody saying anything?
So the overworked government employees of the IHS considered the high birth rate of the Native Americans to be a huge problem that could only be rectified with extreme family planning techniques, which were motivated by racist attitudes and legislation that supported eugenics. So basically, in the 1970s, eugenics and the eugenic movement was a very famous thing, and everybody was on board of that train. So luckily, a subsequent investigation was conducted by the US General Accounting Office. In that investigation, 4 IHS locations were looked into, in which they discovered that Native women had sterilization done in Aberdeen, Albuquerque, Oklahoma City, and Phoenix between very small amount of time, 1973 to 1976. Though it was restricted only to 4 of many IHS hospitals and facilities nationwide and examined only the years between 1973 to 1976, which are 3 years only, the GAO investigation showed that 3,406 involuntary sterilizations were performed in these 4 IHS facilities only during this 3-year period. By 1976, over 25% of Native women in the United States who were of childbearing age had undergone sterilization. Such sterilization practices are clearly a blatant breach of the United Nations Genocide Convention, which declares it an international crime to impose measures intended to prevent births within a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. So basically, if you look at it, since they have breached this convention term, they have committed a sort of an international crime. A small group of Native American women involved in the American Indian movement, led by the founders of Women of All Red Nations, who were Lorelei Decora, Madonna Thunderhawk, Janet McLeod, and Phyllis Young. After being profoundly dissatisfied with the outcome of that investigation that was conducted by the GAO, the group concentrated on fighting back against violence against indigenous women, such as the denial of women's reproductive rights, the forced abortion of Indian children, and the exploitation of native resources. These investigations of WARN shed the light on horrifying pattern of exploitation. On certain reservations, sterilization rates were as high as 80% compared to a national average of 15% for white women.
So you must be thinking, what happened to the forced sterilization today in 2022, almost 2023? Now, I have bad news, you guys. It is still a thing, almost 50 years later, or even more than that, after the heroic act of these beautiful little ladies, or not little anymore, I guess, I don't know, I'm sorry, but like the ladies, the
fierce ladies.
The fierce ladies,
Yes.
okay? After their admirable act, it is still a thing, it is still legal in 31 states today.
That's
Honestly.
like more than half of the states.
Yeah. Now, they're primarily targeting the vulnerable minorities of the country that have been fighting for their rights for centuries, which honestly just makes me so sad because it seems like it's going nowhere. All of this effort and people dying and children dying and just all of this blood loss and soul loss and everything is just going nowhere because it seems like corruption is so far deep that even if you shed light on it, it's still gonna manage to survive, which is honestly so sad. According to the recent studies, Native American women continue to have a considerably higher likelihood of being sterilized at younger ages and of expressing regret that sterilization prevented them from having the children they desired. We do have a somewhat of a heroic figure, however, to combat some of the corruption that is so far deeply rooted. Now, we owe this to Dr. Pinkerman Ury. She supported the indigenous women's organizations, including the Native American Women's Health Education Resource Center and the Indigenous Women Rising and Sacred Hoop Coalition and Tiwa Women United. as well as the Native women in general. So we continue to have women figures that support each other despite the horrible acts of the government against them. However, it does seem like they need a lot of help to get somewhere. So I will try to link some resources down below to Dr. Pinkerman or some of the resources we use to get that information. So if you would like to have another look at this whole thing and where we got our information from, you can do that down below. And this is the end of the video, and we have a special thank you for our professor. Thank you for allowing us to express our creativity through several means, including twice as much the word limit in our project.
Yes.
And the very not normal video format of our presentation. It is much appreciated.
Thank you for all the support that you have given us throughout the entire semester. You made this course very, very knowledgeable to us. You made it very interesting. You made it so much fun to study the entire material. It was very educational. I actually have learned so much from your way of teaching us, from attending the lectures, the conversations that we had with our classmates, with you. Thank you for opening the door of your office all the time to us, and generally for supporting us to show our creativity, to just be us in a bottom line. Thank you for everything, Doctor.
Right, that is it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed it, you can leave me a like down below, and you can comment whatever you want, and I'll see you in my next one. Goodbye.
Don't forget to subscribe.
Sure, yeah, do that as well. It is the right, I think it's the right. Is this your right? I have no idea, but it's a red button down below. If you're colorblind, where I don't know what to tell you, but it says subscribe. Just click on that.
Subscribe.
All right, see ya.